pressed on. But forecast for condos over the next 1 to 2 years. So I think, John here from Honolulu is basically asking us to, generally speaking, where do we see the market going? I'm going to throw my 2 cents in and kind of want to have you folks comment quickly on this. My 2 cents has been, we've been talking since the very beginning of this thing, since day one, literally day one of this show, because we launched this in the COVID world. There's always been COVID questions. And every time that we've talked about it, there's not been a whole lot of changes, a couple of isolated areas notwithstanding, for example, condos in Waikiki. But it's been stable or just as good, or we see all these offers going on. Where for your respective areas? So Scott, I'd like you to speak about condos in Waikiki for the next 2 years. Dylan, let's just kind of keep this to condo market limited and see if there's any exceptions. If there's any kind of Waikiki sort of parallel on the Big Island, and Heidi as well, if there's any kind of Waikiki, what would be the Waikiki parallel on Maui? If you folks can quickly speak to where you see things going in the next 1 to 2 years. Scott, let's start with you.
Yeah, so Waikiki is not what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. It's the exact opposite. What the market segment I was describing was actually, general housing where people are living on Oahu is competitive and will be competitive. With Waikiki, it's been the exact opposite, with prices dropping because there hasn't been any tourism, so there hasn't been any income coming in. Effectively, it's hard to put a number on, what's going to happen. Where is the bottom on it? And I look at it, October 15th could be that. It's the reset portion where you start to have income coming in, tourist income potentially coming into some of those short-term vacation rental second home market. What I the projections from the Tourism Authority that came out said we should be back to 80% pre-COVID within the year, and in 5 years back to full pre-COVID numbers from tourism base. So I look at it as, valuations dropping 20% in Waikiki, roughly 25% is kind of where you would mark it. And then over that next, 4 or 5 year period, as long as we don't have any other crazy economic hiccups, then it could start to rise and get back. And it usually takes about 6 months to a year to start to settle out, bottom out.
So you're if I was to summarize what you just said, Scott, you said there's like a 20%, there's been like a 20% price drop in Waikiki condos. Is that roughly what you're saying? And then kind of a recovery, sort of let's say a slow recovery over a 5 year period that's going to track with what goes on in tourism. Is that roughly what you're saying?
It should. The 20% price drop hadn't happened because I think what you got to do is get through this period where tourists are starting to come back. That's when you'll see your bottom. So if the October 15th gets delayed or some falters, then
right.
Okay, we continue forward. But yeah, that's right. Roughly what you should see. The 20% hadn't happened yet, not the full 20%. That's where, if I was to invest, that's what I'm looking at, because that's where your income numbers have been decreased by you, and that you do valuations. There's equations that you do income right. to value, and they're more or less saying get back to 20%, by the end, within a year. So
to
80%.
For my armchair guy, clueless dude, a perspective here. What I hear you saying is that the prices are can still continue to drop in Waikiki. It's the futures in motion. We don't know when it's going to flip around, etc. But you still see some prices dropping in Waikiki, and then as tourism comes back, of course, those prices will come back. Is that kind of what you're sort of saying?
Yeah, you have two things. Housing and buying a home is not like buying a stock where you have an instantaneous price valuation. So things typically lag, markets typically lag. So it takes a little bit longer for the bottom to kind of level out. And what people are going to need to have the confidence to be able to buy in Waikiki is to start seeing some consistent income coming back in, to know that it's safe for them to buy and that they'll have some income for that property. And that could take 6 months.
Got it. And prices have already dropped in Waikiki, not the full 20%, but prices have already dropped in Waikiki. So in a sense, I don't want to say you're getting a bargain now, but you're getting below kind of what you would buy the property for a little while ago. So really if I'm kind of thinking about this from an investment kind of a standpoint, you kind of want to figure out what you want to, it's always risk. No matter what you do, you can wait, or it could turn around. You could buy now, you could wait, you could ride it out. It's all kinds of issues. Okay, great. Heidi, what would you say is the equivalent? What's the equivalent sort of condo area in Maui that you can speak to, and what do you kind of see going on over the next 1 to 2 years?
Sure. Well, there's no Waikiki in Maui, but I would compare it to resort condos and short-term vacation rental condos, and we have a lot of those in South and West Maui. Um, I mean, right now there's more inventory coming on the market. I think if we do open up and tourism starts returning, that market could be pretty stable with just, I mean, pent up demand from before, from not a lot of sales happening. But it's kind of to be seen. I mean, if we shut down again and are shut down for 3 to 4 months, I think you're going to get a lot more owners that are just going to have to sell because they were depending on that income. I mean, I'm not seeing the buyers anymore that come to me asking, how much am I going to make on this condo? I mean, the buyers coming in today, they're buying because they want to be on Maui and enjoy time here. And that's really the best reason to buy a Maui condo, I mean, in my opinion. But yeah, it's to be seen. It's to be seen.
So I'm kind of hearing again, not too different actually from what Scott's saying, right? There's been some the buyers haven't kind of shown up yet. It's going to be tentative based on what's going to happen with the tourism market. Heidi, has Maui also kind of in those areas, in those resort areas, have the prices also dropped as well? We don't know if they've dropped like they've dropped in Waikiki, but have the prices also dropped over the past 6 months?
There's been some lower sales, and in some complexes. But I mean, overall, they're pretty strong. Prices in that sector on Maui have appreciated a lot just in the past few years. So even if prices are dropping now, I mean, they're still probably making a lot more than they would have 2 years ago. I mean,
Right.
it's interesting. But I mean, for a buyer right now, there's definitely like there's more opportunities now than there were. And then, I mean, it just depends on the particular buyer's goals and, you know, if they're
Sure.
what they want to do with the condo.
Got it. Dylan, fill us in. What's the condo situation going on like on the Big Island?
So this is funny that we always have to give the disclaimer, right? Like we don't have a crystal ball and don't take our advice to the bank, because if you asked me 6, 7 months ago about the condo market, I was super bullish on it because we had just had a new vacation rental regulation put into place on the Big Island, and that was going to greatly reduce the number of single family homes who didn't have the correct zoning who could vacation rent. And what that in effect was going to do was push vacation rentals back to the condo complexes, because the condos all have the correct zoning. Unless their HOA prohibited vacation renting in the condo, you could do it by getting the permit from the county. So I saw going forward as condos increasing in value significantly because the demand for vacation rentals, if that's what your plan was, if your plan was to vacation rent, you would have a lot less competition because you wouldn't have the single family home market out there being able to vacation rent their homes on a whim like you did pretty much up until now. And so 6 months ago, I was telling everybody, you know, condos are going to be a great, especially just a small condo, you know, a studio, a 1 bedroom, a $200,000-300,000 condo would be a great investment because you're going to have more demand if you want to vacation rent it. And of course, then the bottom fell out. COVID hit and nobody's here, and it's not a good time to be owning a vacation rental. So going forward, I still think that dynamic applies. If travel opens back up, you will have the demand for those condos based on just a decrease in the overall inventory. But again, we can never predict when things like this happen and travel slows down. And so you really want to make sure, I think back to Scott's point and Heidi's point about, you want to buy a condo if you definitely want a condo. Don't buy a condo because it's like you think you're going to get rich off of making money. A lot of times it's a break-even endeavor. You know, you get a free place to stay a couple weeks a year, a month out of the year or whatever. But going forward, you know, the vacation rental, once if it comes back, it should be stronger. But an interesting dynamic overall in the market just last month, if we're talking real time, is, and this kind of makes sense, there's a lot more high-end condos selling. So the median price that sold last month was 46% higher than it was a year ago. And that's mainly because the people who are buying condos now are buying higher end, you know, $1 million condos, $800,000 condos that have the disposable income to do that and just hold them, as opposed to the buyer who's buying that lower end $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 condo who, you know, maybe using it as an investment or a vacation rental to try and generate some income. So interesting dynamic in the market. The condo market is still slower, but the higher end market is faster because of the type of buyer that's out there.
So that was a really interesting point that I think all of you have brought up, certainly highly explicitly. But it's like, look, if buy a condo in Hawaii because you want to live in Hawaii, so to speak. Don't buy it on its investment grade that you're looking at, kind of turning it around and kind of making money. It's not this, unless you're really for some risky, rough, bumpy times, it's not going to work out well for you. However, if you're looking to, because you want to live in Hawaii, and again, that's the website's name, right? The website's name is Living in Hawaii. It's not investing in Hawaii realestate.com. We're livinginhawaii.com. Which is really what this whole thing is about. Anyway, that's an interesting observation. I think if you look at it that way, you buy the property because you want to live in the property, as opposed to you're buying it because you're trying to figure out a way to make money as an investor. You're going to be much more better off. Great.